Winter, Chapter 1, Hunting the Snow. You want no gun, no club, no game bag, no steel trap, no snare when you go hunting the snow. Rubber boots or overshoes, a good stout stick to help you up the ridges, a pair of field glasses, and a keen eye are all you need for this hunt, besides, of course, the snow and the open country. You have shoveled the first snow of the winter. You have been snowballing in it. You have coasted on it, and gone sleigh riding over it. But unless you have gone hunting over it, you have missed the rarest, best sport that the first snowfall can bring you. Of all the days to be out in the woods, the day that follows the first snowfall is the best? No, not the best. For there is the day in April when you go after arbutus, and there's the day in June when the turtles come out to lay in the sand. The muggy, cloudy day in August when the perch are hungry for you in the creek. The hazy Indian summer day when the chestnuts are dropping for you in the pastures. The keen, crisp February day when the ice spreads glassy clear and smooth for you over the mill pond. The muddy, raw, half-thawed, half-lighted, half-drowned March day when the pussy willows are breaking and the first spring frogs are piping to you from the meadow. Then there is every day, every one of the 365 days, each of them best days to be out in the live world of the fields and woods. But one of the very best days to be out in the woods is the day that follows the first winter snowfall, for that is the day when you must shoulder a good stout stick and go gunning. Gunning with a stick? Yes, with a stick, and rubber boots, and bird glasses. Along with this outfit, you might take a small jointed foot rule with which to measure your quarry, and a notebook to carry the game home in. It ought to be the day after the first real snow, but not if that snow happens to be a blizzard and lies deep in dry, powdery drifts, for then you could hardly follow a trail if you should find one. Do not try the hunt either if the snow comes heavy and wet, for then the animals will stay in their dens until the snow melts, knowing, as they do, that the soft, slushy stuff will soon disappear. The snow you need will lie even and smooth, an inch or two deep, and will be just damp enough to pack into tight snowballs. If, however, the early snows are not ideal, then wait until over an old crusted snow there falls a fresh layer about an inch deep. This may prove even better hunting, for by this time in the winter the animals and birds are quite used to snow walking, and besides, their stores of food are now running short, compelling them to venture forth whether or not they wish to go. It was in early December that our first hunting snow came last year. We were ready for it, waiting for it, and when the winter sun broke over the ridge, we started the hunt at the henyard gate, where we saw tracks in the thin, new snow that led us up the ridge, and along its narrow back to a hollow stump. Here the hunt began in earnest, for not until that trail of close, double, nail-pointed prints went under the stump were the four small boys convinced that we were tracking a skunk and not a cat. The creature had moved leisurely. That you could tell by the closeness of the prints. Wide-apart tracks in the snow mean hurry. Now a cat, going as slowly as this creature went, would have put down her dainty feet almost in a single line, and would have left round, cushion-marked holes in the snow, not triangular, nail-pointed prints like these. Cats do not venture into holes under stumps either. We had bagged our first quarry. No, we had not pulled that wood pussy out of his hole and put him into our game bag. We did not want to do that. We really carried no bag, and if we had, we should not have put the wood pussy into it, for we were hunting tracks, not animals, and bagging our quarry meant trailing a creature to its den, or following its track till we had discovered something it had done, or what its business was, and why it was out. We were on the snow for animal facts, not pelts. We were elated with our luck, for this stump was not 5 minutes by the ridge path from the henyard, and here, standing on the stump, We were only 60 minutes away from Boston Common by the automobile, driving no faster than the law allows. So we were hunting, not in a wilderness, but just outside our dooryard and almost within the borders of a great city. And that is the first interesting fact of our morning hunt. No one but a lover of the woods and a careful walker on the snow would believe that here in the midst of hayfields, in sight of the smoke of city factories, so many of the original wildwood folk still live and travel their night paths undisturbed. Still, this is a rather rough bit of country, broken, ledgy, boulder-strewn, with swamps and woody hills that alternate with small towns and cultivated fields for many miles around. Here, the animals are still at home, as this hole of the skunks under the stump proved. But there was more proof. As we topped the ridge on the trail of the skunk, we crossed another trail, made up of bunches of 4 prints, 2 long and broad, 2 small and roundish, spaced about a yard apart. 100 times the winter before, we had tried that trail in the hope of finding the form or the burrow of its maker. But it crossed and turned and doubled and always led us into a tangle, out of which we never got a clue. It was the track of the great northern hare, as we knew, and we were relieved to see the strong prints of our cunning neighbor again, for, what with the foxes and the hunters, we were afraid it might have fared ill with him. But here he was, with 4 good legs under him, and, after bagging our skunk, we returned to pick up the hare's trail, to try our luck once more. We followed his long, leisurely leaps down the ridge, out into our mowing field, and over to the birches below the house. Here he had capered about in the snow, had stood up on his haunches and gnawed the bark from off a green oak sucker 2.5 feet from the ground. This, doubtless, was pretty near his length, stretched out. An interesting item. Not exact to the inch, perhaps, but close enough for us. For who would care to kill him in order to measure him with scientific accuracy? Nor was this all, for up the footpath through the birches came the marks of 2 dogs. They joined the marks of the hare, and then, back along the edge of the woods to the bushy ridge, we saw a pretty race. It was all in our imaginations, all done for us by those long flinging footprints in the snow. But we saw it all. The white hare, the yelling hounds, nip and tuck, in a burst of speed across the open field, which must have left a gap in the wind behind. It had all come as a surprise. The hounds had climbed the hill on the scent of a fox, and had started the hare unexpectedly. Off he had gone with a jump, but just such a jump of fear as what a hare's magnificent legs were intended for. Those legs carried him a clear 12 feet in some of the longest leaps for the ridge, and they carried him to safety, so far as we could read the snow. In the medley of hare and hound tracks on the ridge there was no sign of a tragedy. He had escaped again. But how and where we have still to learn. We had bagged our hare, yet we have him still to bag. And taking up the trail of one of the dogs, we continued our hunt. One of the joys of this snow hunting is having a definite road or trail blazed for you by knowing, purposeful wild animal feet. You do not have to blunder ahead, breaking your way into this wilderness world, trusting luck to bring you somewhere. The wild animal or the dog goes this way, and not that, for a reason. You are watching that reason all along. You are pack fellow to the hound. You hunt with him. Here the hound had thrust his muzzle into a snow-capped pile of slashings, had gone clear round the pile, then continued on his way. But we stopped. For out of the pile, in a single direct line, ran a number of mouse prints, going and coming. A dozen white-footed mice might have traveled that road since the days before, when the snow had ceased falling. We entered the tiny road, for in this kind of hunting a mouse is as good as a mink, and found ourselves descending the woods toward the garden patch below. Halfway down we came to a great red oak, into a hole at the base of which, as into the portal of some mighty castle, ran the road of the mice. That was the end of it. There was not a single straying footprint beyond the tree. I reached in as far as my arm would go and drew out a fistful of popcorn cobs. So here was part of my scanty crop. I pushed in again and gathered up a bunch of chestnut shells, hickory nuts, and several neatly rifled hazelnuts. This was story enough. There must be a family of mice living under the slashing pile, who for some good reason kept their stores here in the recesses of this ancient red oak. Or was this some squirrel's barn being pilfered by the mice, as my barn is the year round? It was not all plain. But this question, this constant riddle of the woods, is part of our constant joy in the woods. Life is always new, and always strange, and always fascinating. It has all been studied and classified according to species. Anyone knowing the woods at all would know that these were mouse tracks, would even know that they were the tracks of the white-footed mouse, and not the tracks of the jumping mouse, the house mouse, or the meadow mouse. But what is the whole small story of these prints? What purpose, what intention, what feeling do they spell? What and why? 100 times. So it is not the bare tracks that we are hunting. It is the meaning of the tracks, where they are going, and what they are going for. Burns saw a little mouse run across the furrows as he was plowing and wrote a poem about it. So could we write a poem if we, like Burns, would stop to think what the running of these little mice across the snow might mean. The woods and fields, summer and winter, are full of poems that might be written if we only knew just all that the tiny snow prints of a wood mouse mean, or understood just what root and all in all, the humblest flower is. The popcorn cobs, however, we did understand. They told a plain story, and falling in with a gray squirrel's track not far from the red oak, we went on, our burdenless game bag heavier, our hearts lighter that we, by the sweat of our brows, had contributed a few ears of corn to the comfort of this snowy winter world. The squirrel's track wound up and down the hillside, wove in and out and round, hitting every possible tree, as if the only road for a squirrel was one that looped and doubled, and tied up every stump, and zigzagged into every tree trunk in the woods. But all this maze was no ordinary journey. He had not run this coil of a road for breakfast, because a squirrel, when he travels, save for distant nuts, goes as directly as you go to your school or office. Only he goes not by streets, but by trees, never crossing more of the open in a single rush than the space between him and the nearest tree that will take him on his way. What interested us here in the woods was the fact that a second series of tracks, just like the first, except that they were only about half as large, dogged the larger tracks persistently, leaping tree for tree and landing track for track with astonishing accuracy. Tracks which, had they not been evidently those of a smaller squirrel, would have read to us most menacingly. As this was the mating season for squirrels, I suggested that it might have been a kind of Atalanta's race here in the woods. But why did so little a squirrel want to mate with one so large? They would not look well together, was the answer of the small boys. They thought it much more likely that Father Squirrel had been playing wood tag with one of his children. Then, suddenly, as sometimes happens in the woods, the true meaning of the signs was fairly hurled at us, for down the hill, squealing and panting, rushing a full-sized gray squirrel, with a red squirrel like a shadow, like a weasel, at his heels. For just an instant I thought it was a weasel. So swift and silent and gliding were its movements, so sad and cruel seemed its expression, so sure, so inevitable its victory. Whether it ever caught the gray squirrel or not, and what it would have done had it caught the big fellow, I do not know. But I have seen the chase often, the gray squirrel nearly exhausted with fright and fatigue, the red squirrel hard after him. They tore round and round us, then up over the hill, and disappeared. one of the rarest prints for most snow hunters nowadays, but one of the commonest hereabouts, is the quick, sharp track of the fox. In the spring particularly, when my fancy young chickens are turned out to pasture, I have spells of fearing that the fox will never be exterminated here in this untillable but beautiful chicken country. In the winter, however, when I see Reynard's trail across my lawn, when I hear the music of the baying hounds and catch a glimpse of the white-tipped brush swinging serenely in advance of the coming pack, I cannot but admire the capable, cunning rascal, cannot but be glad for him and marvel at him, so resourceful, so superior to his almost impossible conditions, his almost numberless foes. We started across the meadow on his trail, but found it leading so straight away for the ledges and so continuously blotted out by the passing of the pack that, striking the wallowy path of a muskrat in the middle of the meadow, we took up the new scent to see what the shuffling, cowering water rat wanted from across the snow. A man is known by the company he keeps, by the way he wears his hat, by the manner of his laugh, and among the wild animals, nothing tells more of character than their manner of moving. You can read animal character as easily in the snow as you can read act and direction. The timidity, the indecision, the lack of purpose, the restless, meaningless curiosity of this muskrat were evident from the first in the starting, stopping, returning, going on track he had plowed out in the thin snow. He did not know where he was going or what he was going for. He knew only that he insisted upon going back, but all the while kept going on, that he wanted to go to the right or to the left, yet kept moving straight ahead. We came to a big wallow in the snow where, in sudden fear, he had had a fit at the thought of something that might not have happened to him had he stayed at home. Every foot of the trail read, "He would if he could, if he couldn't, how could he?" We followed him on across a dozen other trails, for it is not every winter night that the muskrat's feet get the better of his head, and, willy-nilly, take him abroad. Strange and fatal weakness, he goes and cannot stop. Along the stone wall of the meadow we tracked him, across the high road, over our garden, into the orchard, up the wood hill to the yard, back down the hill to the orchard, out into the garden, and back toward the orchard again. And here, on a knoll, just at the edge of the scanty, skeleton shadow where the sunlight fell through the trees, we lost him. Two mighty wings, we saw, had touched the snow lightly here, and the lumbering trail had vanished as into the air. Close and mysterious, the shadowy, silent wings hang poised indoors and out. Laughter and tears are companions. Life begins, but death sometimes ends the trail. Yet the sum of life, outdoors and in, is peace, gladness, and fulfillment.